I love being in the industry. I love moving freight. I love talking to people because the people in the industry are the really salt of the earth people.
Yeah.
Just good, down to earth, grounded people. We want to enjoy the industry we're going to spend our careers in. There's enough opportunities in life to be miserable. We don't want our jobs to add to that. So I think a lot of people who have been a part of these larger organizations, who have learned what to do and what not to do, they're the ones who are starting these companies. They're the ones who are going out and changing the conversation. They're on podcasts, running podcasts, trying to change the conversation. Everyone is in the same boat, and I think if we can all just come together on the main issues, I have every optimism that we will change the course of the industry for the better.
I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Sales-CRM. If you haven't heard about Sales-CRM, they've been a sponsor of ours for about 4.5 months now, and they are honestly the premier CRM for freight brokers and sales agent teams. It's pretty unique to have a specific product for freight brokers that can house all of your follow-ups, all your shipper prospecting. I know when I was a broker, I did have a hard time, following up and being able to kind of manage my leads through the kind of some of those traditional CRM platforms. So when I heard about Sales-CRM, Josh showed it to me probably over a year ago, and I've been a big advocate for what they're doing since then, and that's why they're a sponsor of ours, and I just want to thank them again for being a sponsor. If you guys haven't checked them out, make sure you guys do. Links in the description, but you can also check them out, sales-crm.com. You can try it free for 14 days. Go there, check it out. No credit card needed. Welcome to the Think Freight Podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Werdine, and it's my pleasure to have Dan Lindsey. He's the founder of Broker Carrier Summit, which is having an event on October 23rd through the 25th in Fort Worth, Texas. It's a can't-miss event. Dan, welcome to the podcast. We're thrilled to have you here, man.
Thanks for having me, Thomas. Appreciate you, man.
Of course, man. Of course. Your mission really aligns to kind of why I started ThinkFreight and just kind of the overall mission of what I want to push, in the industry, right? Is relationships and brokers and carriers kind of getting along in a different way than we have seen over the last 10 or 15 years. So I wanted to have you on to kind of talk about your background. I think it's very unique, and you've got a cool presence in the space now. And then we'll kind of dive into the Broker Carrier Summit and what you guys are going to be hosting there in DFW. So why don't we dive right into kind of your background, who you are, where'd you grow up, and kind of things like that.
Excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold.
No, you're good.
Yeah. So, Dan Lindsey. I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana, born and raised Midwestern kid.
Love it.
I kind of classify myself as the George Bailey of Indianapolis. You ever watch It's a Wonderful Life?
Yeah.
He's always trying to get out of where he was from, and situations always kind of just bring him back.
Right.
That's kind of me. So I joined the Marine Corps to try and get out of Indiana. I got stationed at a reserve unit in Indianapolis. So That's what it is. Apparently somebody higher than me wants me here.
Yeah.
So Indianapolis, Indiana. I got my start in freight. So a little bit of family background. My grandfather was a literal milk truck driver back when those were a thing. So he ran a milk run. And my dad was a driver for UPS for 30 years. I actually went to go work for UPS in 2001 as a preloader, and then swore to him I'd never get into freight because freight is awful. And here I am, 24 years later, still in logistics. Moved into the brokerage space in 2013. Got my start at brokerage at TQL.
Oh, nice.
So I was there for 6 years. I thought your name sounded familiar when you first reached out. I was like, I think I know this guy from somewhere. And I was looking at your LinkedIn. And oh, okay, that makes total sense. So
you were in what office were you in?
Indy.
Oh yeah, I was in Chicago. I was under Matt Stack for a long time. If you know Stack.
Oh, I know Stack. Yeah.
Yeah, I was in his group for a long time. And then he left and went to Australia. So I went through kind of that period where I was transitioning from Stack to a new GSM. And then I was only there for probably another 4 to 6 months. I ended up moving to Houston, but that's a totally different story. But yeah, that's cool. I kind of had recognized your name too before like when I first saw Broker Carrier Summit pop, I was like, that name sounds really familiar. And when I was looking the other day, I was like, oh yeah, TQL. Like I think that's why I recognize
Yeah,
it.
we probably shared carriers at some point.
Oh yeah. No, that's cool,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, so I was there for 6 years, from 2013 to 2019, and really needed a change. So I got out of the grind of brokerage and went into the very, very slow and methodical world of consulting for a year. I worked for a consulting company doing business development for them, and after about 6 or 7 months, I realized that, okay, I'm learning a lot about the broader transportation landscape and logistics and different facets of the industry,
Yeah.
but it's just way too slow here. I need you would open an opportunity and you wouldn't be able to close the deal for probably 2, 3, 4 years sometimes, just because it's all project based consulting. And
Right.
so I didn't have the patience for that, and realized that early on, and decided in March or in August of 2019, decided to talk to a buddy of mine about starting a brokerage, and we finally launched that in March of 2020. And so we started Linkage Logistics March 1st, 2020, March 14th. He and I both had matching coronaries.
That was a great time to start a brokerage, man.
It was, and we didn't know it. We didn't know what was going to happen at the time. Nobody really
Yeah.
did. So we had a mild freak out in the middle of March when the world literally shut down.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
So we decided to just, throw our entire effort into it, keep our heads down, and just go. And we grew it quite a bit. So we had, over the first 3 years, we grew by 625%. Grew it to about a $10 million shop, and from nothing, which was a good milestone for us. And that's when the market kind of took a dive on itself, and I started getting a lot of complaints actually from carriers about brokers, and started having conversations about carriers with brokers, and realized that the disconnect between carriers and brokers is very real. It's always been understood.
Right.
But it came to a head for me in January of 2023, and I just decided to try something that nobody had done before. So that's my freight journey in 2 minutes.
No, dude, I think that's a really interesting journey, and I want to kind of dive into starting Linkage, because you did start at such an interesting time, and probably a month in, like you said, you guys were having a mild freak out. I know and empathize with that, because a buddy of mine, from TQL as well, we had started a brokerage, and we had waited out our non-competes. Everything was fine. We weren't going after any old customers, but we also had a freak out. It was a really scary time to be like, wow, we just sank a lot of our time, efforts into this, and now the world could be shutting down or whatever may happen. And, the next 3 months, we didn't have a crazy shutdown as bad as it could have been. And things started to kind of get back to a new normal. And I think that's a really interesting. So what was kind of your approach to kind of growth during that time, right? The rates were kind of sky high. Capacity was crazy hard to find. What was kind of your approach to start, I guess, gaining new business during such a tumultuous time?
Yeah, so one of the things that we always said from the beginning is we wanted to be the broker of choice, not only for shippers, but for carriers.
Yeah.
And so we developed early on some really deep partnerships with carriers, to the point where they would send prospects to us and say, hey, I would love to move loads out of this place because I find myself empty here frequently. Can you, as your sales guys, can you get us in? And so we would partner with our carriers to do that. And they would get first dibs on whatever loads we got. And that was one of the things, too, that really set us apart in the COVID rush. Because I can't remember, our buddy Kevin, mutual friend Kevin Hill over at Brush Pass knows this, but how many brokerages were started exactly from March 2020 to July of 2022.
Right.
It was a crazy number. But in order to stand out in that new saturated environment was with service. And the number one driver of service for brokers is not only having capacity at your fingertips, but having reliable capacity at your fingertips that your shipper customers know to be reliable. That was key for us. And we didn't go after massive companies in the beginning. Our sweet spot was those $10 to $500 million companies who have between a $1 million and a $10 million freight spend, because those are the companies that don't have systems. They don't have a lot of processes. Usually, oftentimes, especially with the smaller ones, the founder or the founder's wife is the one booking freight. We could help them systematize their transportation from that perspective. And so we were able to add more value to the smaller to mid-sized shippers than we would have been able to with the massive shippers.
You had mentioned, around 2020, tail end of 2022, going into 2023, you started to get a lot more carrier complaints about brokers. What kind of complaints were you getting, and what was kind of, I guess, the straw that broke the camel's back that said, I need to do something about this, not just within Linkage, but at an industry level? Yeah,
so July and August of 22, it wasn't that we were getting different complaints. What did it for me was, and what really got me thinking down this road was the kind of the frequency of the same kind of complaint, and the kind of complaint that really took the cake from July of 22 to even now is this complaint of brokers are scamming me out of my money, and the driver for that has been this absolute just overwhelming tsunami of double brokering and fraud. Carriers don't know which brokerages are legitimate, especially if they live on the load boards. It's the Wild West out there. They will be taken advantage of more often than not, it seems, in this environment. And so a lot of carriers, trust was already an issue between carriers and freight brokers. And then the scammers kind of just invaded the market. And that trust just, if it was already in the toilet, it's deep, deep, deep in the sewer lines beneath the city at this point. And so there was a need for someone to step in and say, hey, there are trustworthy partners in this industry. You just have to know where to look to find them. And by the way, we're going to provide a place to find them. So come to these summits, join our network of legitimate, best practice oriented, partnership driven carriers and brokers, and you can be sure that the companies you're working with are legitimate and not going to scam you out of your money.
Now you've sold and completely divested away from Linkage Logistics to 100% Spearhead Broker Carrier Summit. So I want to dive more into that and really just talk deep about relationships and things like that. But first, how many events have you guys held so far? You guys started in January of 2023. How many events have you guys held over the last year and a half so far?
Yeah, so we've held 3 events. The first event was in Indianapolis, and we had 35 people in person, which wasn't a large number, but the number wasn't as impressive as from where the people came. We had carriers and brokers coming literally from Maine and Los Angeles and Miami, coming to Indianapolis to see somebody they didn't know, me, talk about something that wasn't popular. I'm not an influencer. I don't have a following. More so now, I think, than then. But they came to Indianapolis to see an unknown, essentially, to see what was out there. And that was the tell for us. There was a larger conversation at play. So we had 35 people in person and 40 online in Indianapolis. Our second event was in Tampa. We had 226 people in Tampa last October. And then we just wrapped up in April our third event in Kansas City, where we had 360 people attending.
That's awesome. What do you know the kind of breakdown? Was it like 50-50 on carriers to brokers, or who was attending these events?
Yeah, so it's around 40 to 45% brokers and carriers, depending on which event we're talking about. So in Tampa, there were more carriers than brokers. In Kansas City, there were actually more brokers than carriers. Ideally, what I think we're trying to get to, what we'd love to get to, is a 2-to-1 carrier-broker ratio, where we have twice as many carriers as brokers attending. So we're really driving that in our promotions. We reduced our cost to carriers by quite a bit. We want carriers to come. We know it's more expensive for them to take a truck off the road for 3 days. So we're rolling out options like day passes and learning labs to get them in, just so they can, again, so they can see the more honorable, legitimate players in the game.
Yeah, I was going to ask you because I see a lot of chatter online about a lot of these events, and especially from the carrier side, is how tough it is to break away for 1, 2, 3 days, especially in this market, to take your truck offline and to not move freight. So it's nice that you guys are helping, provide some of those extra steps, making it a little bit cheaper for carriers to come, making it, a little bit easier for them to kind of have some of those key takeaways that maybe they're looking for to help, drive new revenue or just new ideas for their business, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because again, it is. You take a truck off the road for a week, essentially, you're losing between $5 and $10 grand, depending on the type of freight you're used to moving, the area you're used to moving out of, the frequency of the loads you move. I mean, you're losing quite a bit of money, and so we want to make sure that it's worth their time to attend one of these.
Why is it so important for you guys to have kind of that 2-to-1 carrier broker ratio?
Because I think brokers have a lot of ground to make up. One of the things that we say internally all the time is you have to own your own T, right? You have to own your own stuff, own your crap. And brokers have a lot of blame in the area of the deterioration of broker carrier relationships. And so we want as many carriers as possible to, again, come and see the legitimate, best practice oriented, partnership focused players in the industry, so that they know who they can trust. And as many carriers as are out there that know who they can trust and know that ABC brokerage is legitimate and they're not going to screw you over. And if they do, they're going to get a call from Dan Lindsey. Then that's going to be that's good for the industry. Also, it's really hard to with a 1-to-1 carrier broker ratio to identify or to match rather loads with capacity. So one of the things we rolled out in Kansas City was a luncheon lanes networking opportunity for carriers and brokers who run similar freight to sit at the same tables in the same section. So if you run van freight as a broker or as a carrier, you sit in the van freight room for lunch and you talk about lane opportunities and capacity availability with each other. The more people we can get into a room on the carrier side, I think the more valuable that's going to bring to the brokers. Also, the more carriers get exposed to these brokers and have conversations. There's almost 400,000 carriers in the U.S. and 25,000 brokerages, and so there's a lot more carriers out there that need freight. So I think that would be a good thing.
Relationships are such an important part of this industry, but when we get into these down cycles, these bull markets, and we tend to brokers and carriers both tend to get away from their relationships and chase on the carrier side the highest paying freight, and on the broker side the cheapest carrier possible. Why do you think that is, and how can we kind of change that conversation to just being fully relationship driven for some of these lanes and some of these overall market share, right? I think overall, when I was a broker, Dan, I was fully committed to just building relationships, because it made me feel better sleeping at night when I had produce on the road, knowing that I've ran 150 loads with XYZ carrier, and I'm only going to get a call if something is a tremendous emergency or something is really messed up. But they know the customer, they know the lane, they know how to handle things. So why aren't more carriers and brokers taking advantage of partnerships and relationships?
There's a lot of answers to that question. I think freight has moved into more of a transactional, commoditized industry by a lot over the last 10 years. COVID did nothing but exaggerate that. You had a lot of carriers and a lot of brokers, again, coming into the industry, and a lot of people coming into the industry at its peak, mid-COVID, thinking that was normal, right? And so I think a lot of people who are chasing the highest dollar amount for loads or for or lowest amount of rate for a truck. I think they're caught in this idea that everything should be like it was in 2021. And not only are they wanting that to be the case, but if you started your company, especially as a trucking company, in 2021, 2022, you went out and bought 5 or 10 trucks, your cost structure is hosed from the beginning. So you not only want that higher rated load, you need that to operate, because you have truck payments that are 2 or 3 times what they would have been had you started your trucking company 2 or 3 years prior. So there's a lot of factors that play into that. I think one of the things too, especially during COVID, when it comes to the relationship piece, meeting people in person became virtually impossible.
Right.
Even when it came to events and conferences and trade shows, it became impossible because everything was shut down. And so relationships then became commoditized. They became transactional. They became like this over Zoom,
right.
Or over the phone or over email. So I think there's a lot of things that have happened in the last 5 to 6 years that have just eroded away the necessity for interpersonal connection and relationships, and we need to get that back.
It can be really tough for smaller carriers and newer carriers out there. I see it all the time where a company driver for 5, 6, 10 years goes off on his own and really struggles the first 6 months to a year because they don't have an MC that's aged. They don't have some of those factors now that in this market, especially with a lot of double brokers and bad actors in the space, that we're seeing a lot of brokers just saying, hey, if you have under 6 months of authority, we're not gonna onboard you.
Yeah.
How does Broker Carrier Summit address maybe some of those issues? And I guess it's maybe just putting a face to the truck and not knowing for 100% certainty that this person isn't gonna scam me or be fraudulent, right?
Yeah, well, that is the key, is those face-to-face interactions. If you have a relationship with somebody and you've literally sat across the table from this person and talked freight for 2 days, right? You're much less likely to be scammed by that person for a multitude of reasons. One, you both invested money and time to go to an event that is specifically geared toward weeding out bad actors.
Right.
The scammers, the fraudsters, double brokers, they are not going to invest time and money in going to an event that is designed to expose them. They're just not going to.
Right.
We have a whole track on double brokering and fraud prevention, so they're not going to be there. Secondly, is again, you restore that interpersonal relationship piece. It's one thing to have a really good phone conversation with somebody or a really good email interaction with somebody. It's quite another thing to sit down across the table and share a meal with somebody.
Yeah.
Because you're able to have a more intimate conversation, a more meaningful conversation, and you're able to dig deeper below the surface to find out, if you're a broker, hey, why do you say your cost per load is this? Why is that? Help educate me as a broker. Teach me about you. And that's something that I'll pick on brokers because I'm a broker, right? I'll pick on them all day long. We suck at that.
Yes, we do.
We suck hard at that. And that's one of the most legitimate gripes that carriers have when it comes to brokerages. They don't know what it takes to operate a truck. They don't know what it takes to run a trucking company. One of the ideas we've thrown around, funnily enough, for the upcoming summit is we've thrown this idea around for the last couple, but it's having a Class 1 inspection on site and requiring the brokers to go to it. We're hung up on the piece of requiring the brokers to come to it because I don't think anybody would go. But again, it's something that they've never experienced that is a regular part of a truck driver's life that they need to be aware of. So,
I think that's interesting because me personally, I would love to go to something like that to see what these inspections are like, to see what how detailed and how thorough they are, so that when you are going through these blitz situations or just a normal day and a driver says, hey, I'm being pulled over, I've been inspected, or I've been chosen for a random DOT inspection, you just kind of understand, okay, like this is the process, this is what they're looking for. if they're nitpicking on things. So that way we just kind of have a better understanding, more empathy for what the carriers are going through, because they really are the ones that are going through most of those headaches. We don't, as brokers, Dan, without their capacity, without them, we can't service our customers. So we have to empathize better with what they're doing.
Yeah, and that's something that we tell carriers all the time, and all brokers know this, and all carriers know this, but we drive it home. Without carriers, brokers don't have a business.
Yeah,
we don't. So we need carriers. And the converse, the opposite is also true. Without brokers, a majority of these smaller to mid-sized carriers who live on the load boards, they don't have a business either. So we need each other in very existential ways. So,
yeah, I completely agree, and I think that there needs to be carriers and brokers alike. And I'll actually say brokers and carriers alike, because I think that brokers should be first in mind of this. But I think that we've gotten away from it. I think this is kind of the only industry that I've been in to where the carrier and the broker relationship is it's very transactional. It's not like a customer relationship, and that's where I think that I've always really gotten confused about that, because it's just like I always tried to treat my carriers the same way as I treat my shippers, because like you said, I can't move freight without them, and I need my shippers as well. So they're both my customers in essence, and I've got to make sure that they're both treated well. Like I said, I don't want to have to go find new shipping partners for all these lanes. I want to just keep carriers happy, keep them running, and actually service my customers well.
Yeah, exactly. This is the only industry that I've been in where it seems like treating your customers like crap is the norm. Yeah. Which is so wild. It's like, oh, I get cussed out by my carriers every day, or I call my broker and I cuss them out every day. Why do you do that? One, and two, why do they tolerate it? I think we've grown to, understand that that's just table stakes anymore. And I think people are really tired of that. One of the things that I find really interesting is the number of young people or younger people who have gone to work for these larger carriers or larger brokerages, and they've seen, and they've learned what I say all the time, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And they really have an opportunity to change the conversation. And many of them want to, because I love logistics. I love being in the industry. I love moving freight. I love talking to people, because the people in the industry are the really salt of the earth people. Yeah. Just good, down to earth, grounded people. We want to enjoy the industry we're going to spend our careers in. There's enough opportunities in life to be miserable. We don't want our jobs to add to that. So I think a lot of people who have been a part of these larger organizations, who have learned what to do and what not to do, they're the ones who are starting these companies. They're the ones who are going out and changing the conversation. They're on podcasts, running podcasts, trying to change the conversation. Everyone is in the same boat. And I think if we can all just come together on the main issues, I have every optimism that we will change the course of the industry for the better.
I am too, Dan. I'm very, very bullish on what change is coming in the future. I want to ask, what are some of the I know that not everything is probably finalized yet for the next Broker Carrier Summit, but what are some of the topics that that are going to be discussed, and some of those really top of mind things that are going to be being discussed at the next event?
Yeah, so we're going to have the agenda finalized by August 9th. That is the goal. Hopefully sooner. But what I know is going to be discussed is the topic of fraud and double brokering. Until that goes away, that's going to be a cornerstone of our content offering. So fraud and double brokering, carrier and broker vetting, and why that's important. We're going to have a finance track to learn, so carriers and brokers can both learn the value and the reasons why carriers and brokers opt for factoring, the value that factoring companies bring, what tools are out there. We're also going to have, some learning labs on the first day that are focused on winning freight. So we have 2 that are confirmed right now. One is going to be given by Hector Rodriguez, talking about winning Mexican freight, because Mexican freight is a growing sector of our industry. And so winning Mexican freight with Hector. And then Melanie Patterson, an absolute rock star. She's fantastic. Going to be talking about winning government contracts. And these learning labs are going to be deep dives into this. So I think Melanie's going to be 3 hours long. But going through this, the procurement process for the government and saying, hey, this is how you navigate this. So that's just a sampling. We're going to have some really great keynotes. I'm not at liberty to say who is going to be keynoting at this time, but we will be rolling those out in the next month or so, as well as networking opportunities. One of the things that I'm personally really excited about is our opening welcome reception is going to be a speed networking, speed dating event, where if you get 3 minutes to pitch, to give your elevator pitch if you're a broker, to carriers, if you're a carrier, to brokers, if you're a factoring company or a TMS system, to brokers or carriers. And everyone's going to get a chance to meet as many people as possible in that first 2.5 hours of the event on Wednesday, the 23rd. So again, the summits themselves are marked by 2 words. I say this at every event: intentionality and authenticity. Everything we do is on purpose.
Yeah.
And even the hard conversations that we have are had on purpose because they need to happen. And everything is done with the authentic idea that we're here to help. We're here to help carriers. We're here to help brokers. We're here to help everyone in the industry. We want the summit, the Broker Carrier Summit, to be a brand elevator for everyone involved.
I love that, Dan. And just touching on what you said, it's no one likes to be uncomfortable, right? But having those tough conversations, having those uncomfortable conversations is where we all grow. It's where we all learn. It's where we all can understand each other from a real perspective. And I think that, sometimes some of the things that are said to brokers on the phone, to carriers on the phone, I tend to say that you wouldn't say that to someone if you were face to face with them, right? So why would you say it to him over the phone? And I remember specifically there was one conversation I had with a carrier who was just going to town on me, and I said, "Hey man, would you say this to me if you were standing in front of your mother, or would you say this if I was standing right in front of you?" And he literally just stopped, and he was like, "No, he's like, I apologize, man." He was like, and it wasn't even something like nothing I could have done. It was a shipper issue, and it was just like taking it out on me. And I understand, like he had had it with brokers that day, whatever it was. And I took it on the chin for a little while, but there just comes a point where we all have to realize, hey, we're all humans. We all have emotions. We all are just trying to get through our days, trying to move freight, trying to make the world a little bit better one day at a time. And, we're all not bad people. It's just mistakes happen, and we just all have to learn to, I think, kind of deal with those in a little bit better of a manner in this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I tell to my kids all the time: the first person to have the conversation owns it.
Yeah.
So if you bring the conversation up, guess what? You control the narrative. Yep. You control the tone. It's your conversation to have. And so we're doing that instead of just sitting back and letting everybody else talk about double brokering or talk about, why this broker sucks or why this carrier is awful. We're going to reclaim the conversation, and we're going to have those conversations, and hopefully in productive ways. So
I love it, Dan. I have one more quick question for you before I let you hop, but I think this is a fun one and can be a little bit interesting. So what are you most bullish on for the rest of the year? We've talked a lot about some of these tougher conversations and a lot of relationship building, but what are you most bullish on? I think there's a lot to be excited about.
I think there is too. And I think the hidden gem in all of the rest of the year is going to be consolidation. Honestly, and it sounds horrible to say that because companies are going to get absorbed. A lot of them are going to go out of business. But if you want to remain in the industry, there will be ample opportunity for you to remain in the industry. But the companies that emerge from this market are going to be, I think, stronger, more efficiently set up. Their processes and their systems are going to be well vetted during the downturn. And I think the logistics industry, brokers and carriers, will come out of this prolonged environment. I don't know how we don't come out better. So that's what I'm really excited about.
Dan, I'm really excited about, honestly, the same. I think there is going to be a ton of consolidation, a ton of M&A over the next 6 to 18 months. But I think we're starting to get kind of on that right trend of seeing rates kind of go back up in a positive direction in some of these produce areas and some of these other lanes. So I think things are gonna start coming back up. And like you said, the companies who are able to weather the storm, stay in business, they're gonna come out the other side and be a lot stronger and have a lot more momentum going forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dan, I really appreciate you coming on, taking the time out of your day. If the audience wants to learn more, get in touch, or they want to come to the Broker Carrier Summit, how can they find you guys, and how can they get some tickets?
Yeah, you can go to our website, www.brokercarriersummit.com, click the Get Tickets or About links, and you will be taken right to our event website. If you want to reach out to me directly, my email address is dan@brokercarriersummit.com, and I'd be happy to schedule some time, talk about the summit, talk about how people can get involved. That's the number one question we have, is how can we get involved in this? So if you want to be involved, send me an email. We'll put some time on the calendar and we'll talk.
Awesome, Dan. I really appreciate it. We'll have the links for Dan and for the summit all on the show notes. If you're a certified non-scumbag and you like today's episode, make sure you give it a like and review. Don't forget, we do drop 3 weekly freight newsletters, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. ThinkFreight.io, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode.